All right, so blood is leaving. It's depleted of its oxygen and it's picked up all that waste, right? Carbon dioxide and waste. Now it's bringing it back to the heart, right? And as it moves through the capillary bed, the pressure, the capillary beds are very delicate vessels, right? And so there's not too much pressure going in them. And by the time they leave, there's almost zero pressure moving through them right there, right? And so that's one thing to consider. The other thing is look at the layer of the lumen compared to the actual layer walls right here. The lumens of your veins are generally larger than your arteries right here as it moves through. And this will be kind of reflected of the fact that you can expand this. There's not a whole lot of elastic fibers in here, so it's not like it's so much it's storing the energy is going to push it ahead like one of those arteries, but it can expand and hold a lot of blood. Right? So if you look at what the term venous reserve refers to the fact that most of the blood in your body is being held within your veins right here, right? So for the most part in your different circuits right here, a lot of your blood is being held within your veins right there. Right? And so if at any point you start losing blood in one part of your body, you still have some capacity to replace that because this venous reserve is holding a lot of your blood as it moves through. Right? And so the other thing about veins is that unlike arteries, you're going to have this double set of vessels here, these superficial and a deep set. And this is going to be similar to what we talked about with anastomosis, but that blood can be shunted, and you'll see this in your limbs for the most part, sort of superficially, right, when you need to release heat, or they can be shunted deep if you want to retain heat, right, in general. Right? So if you look at the arm right here, you'll see the superficial set of veins running above the fascia of your muscle compartments right there, right? And that's why you could see them right through your skin right there, whereas the deep veins are going to be running along deep inside those muscular compartments right there. And so the deep veins running alongside the arteries, right? So that your subclavian and your axillary, your brachial, your radial, your ulnar arteries have corresponding veins to them right there. So this is another picture of the veins right here going down. So those are all the ones that will have similar names to your arteries, right? But then all these ones in light blue right here are showing these superficial veins, right? And they have names: cephalic, basilic, median cubical, that you won't find, the corresponding artery name to right there, because the arteries are all running deep. Right, so the median cubital is a big one. And again, think of the blood coming back through the arms. They're either coming through the basilic and the cephalic. The cephalic one merges into this median cubital one, which is going to feed into your basilic vein right here, right? So again, you want to look at it in this direction versus arteries. Well, you'll be saying the brachial artery feeds into your radial, right? So they'll be named accordingly and talked about accordingly.
A question.
Right? So here we were, veins, right? And here are those arteries, right? You're facing that big differences in pressure as your heartbeat. All that pressure is being sort of mediated, right, by that elastic arteries. And so it's dampening it until you get to a really smooth flow in there, right? And the pressure going through here, right, is going to go down to about 0 right here, right, as it goes. And that goes all the way through your whole venous system, right? And so that pressure is not enough to move blood through your system. So the question you're asking me, how does blood move through the veins? That's what I'm going to answer, right? So sometimes it's pretty easy, right? The blood from above your heart is draining mostly through gravity, right? So the blood draining your head is going to drop down from your jugular veins, your internal and external jugular veins, right, into your brachiocephalic and then into your superior vena cava, right? Right, just what we said here, right? But when you're talking about this big inferior vena cava, right, going through your gut, right, as well as down in your legs, even more so, right? How is this blood moving up against gravity right there? And that's what we kind of go over today, right? All these vessels. And, naturally, this is where you are going to see problems when you do have circulation problems. This is why they're happening in the lower limb right there. So you need these mechanisms to move that blood upwards, right? So number one, you have these one-way valves, right? These are kind of like those pulmonary or the semilunar valves we talked about, right? These are just kind of an out sort of structure coming from the endothelial cells, right? That their structure allows the blood to flow through, right? If they're being pushed through in some way, but not go backwards, right? When the pressure is greater here than there, right? So they're partitioning the blood into different sections. So if you look along the sections of your leg, and in general, this is mostly in your limbs for medium and smaller size veins, right? I don't know the extent of what this is happening in your abdominal aorta. I don't think there actually are those in here. And they certainly don't need them in your jugular and stuff when blood is going down. This is generally something for your legs and arms. So this breakdown for varicose veins, for instance, right? When you have a breakdown of these, the valves, when the blood is squeezed up a little bit, it flows back down. It creates these big pools, right? And you get this distension and twisting of the large legs of these large veins here that are going to be filled with blood, right? And it makes sense why this is naturally occurring in the legs, because this is where they have faced the greatest sort of obstacle to move up against gravity. And so what is moving it against gravity, right? So when you look at the structure of these veins, they're going to be positioned so that when your muscles contract in your legs, the contraction of those is going to squeeze, kind of milk the blood upwards right here. It's going to push the blood up. And so your muscles contract, it squishes the blood up. If they relax, those valves will kind of stop the backflow right there. So I've learned something since March, that if you stand in one place and don't move around a lot, your blood tends to pool, your lymphatic fluid, another thing we'll talk about in a minute, your blood and everything tends to pool down in your legs a lot if you're not moving around a lot. Or if you were sitting a lot, the same thing happens, right? That's why you get varicose veins. So I'm going to tell you right now, it helps a lot if you move around a lot, because you do get these defects here, because you need this skeletal muscle pump to milk that blood upward. All right, so that's up in your limbs, right? Where those valves are present, and muscles can kind of squeeze that blood up. As I mentioned, in your aortic, in your abdominal region, in the bigger veins here, you don't really have those. The muscle contraction is not optimal for kind of squishing that blood up. So the second mechanism here is what's called a thoracic pump right here. And going back to breathing, this is so annoying. Going back to the breathing, way back when we expanded the rib cage, the diaphragm, we opened up, we sort of created this large volume increase in our thoracic cavity. What happened there? It increased or decreased pressure. Exactly. It decreased pressure. When you're decreasing pressure, back to the respiration stuff, you're drawing in air to that thoracic cavity. You're also increasing pressure in your abdominal area when you do that, right? If you're increasing pressure here, that's going to kind of push up and draw up the blood against gravity up toward the inferior vena cava right here, right? So again, and with exhalation, that's going to help also push it into the right atrium right there. So this thoracic pump is another way you can kind of draw blood up against gravity in these veins, which have very low pressure. Right? Some people also think when you're doing like CPR, when you're doing the pump, you're pumping the chest right here, you're also kind of triggering, you're kind of activating this thoracic pump by doing those gravity changes, moving blood up into the thoracic cavity, moving blood around. Another thing, right, here's your inferior vena cava moving up alongside the aorta on the side here. Remember your abdominal aorta right here. You have the celiac trunk that breaks off, feeds your liver, your stomach. You have the mesenteric one feeding all your intestines, and so on, right? Your liver gets blood from the common hepatic artery, right? Fresh blood, oxygenated blood, so that the liver as a tissue can survive, right? However, their liver has another blood source to do its job, right? We already talked about this in several contexts, right? Your inferior vena cava is back here, but draining the blood from your whole gastrointestinal tract is this hepatic portal vein, right? So all the blood being drained goes into this hepatic portal vein and enters the inferior side of the liver here. It enters with the hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein, draining your intestines, your stomach and everything, liver feeding into the liver, right? So if you looked at really, where the common hepatic artery feeds into the liver, that portal vein will be entering the same place, right over here, right? So that's your liver as doing its functioning job is getting that hepatic portal blood, right? And processing it for whatever the liver does. Right, so again, and then once it's drained, once it does its job, it's going to drain through the hepatic vein, right? Which is on the superior portion, feeding into your inferior vena cava, right? So the hepatic portal vein is on the inferior side, hepatic vein is on the superior side. Here is the blood supply to those villi, for instance, right? Again, blood coming into the villi, it's picking up nutrients in that first capillary bed, and then it's being drained out of the intestine, and then it's going to go through that portal vein, right, where that nutrient-rich blood with also alcohol, drugs, toxin, whatever, is going to come in through that portal vein, kind of splash around the liver, right, in the second capillary bed within the liver before returning into the inferior vena cava, right? So that's that portal system, which I've mentioned a couple of times right there. And then the capillaries there, again, are going to spill out a whole bunch of stuff, incomplete basement membrane, as well as those large intercellular clefts to allow for more free diffusion. In fact, especially in the spleen and some parts of these, you could actually move an entire red blood cell out of those capillaries. So very big things going, right? So stuff getting in, going to go through that second capillary bed through those portal system.